Okay, let's unpack this. We all know conflict is messy.
Hmm.
Whether it's a high-stakes corporate negotiation or, the daily friction of a shared living space. When things go sideways, the first casualty is always effective communication.
Always.
People stop talking to each other, and crucially, they completely stop listening.
And when that communication barrier goes up, disputes don't just stop moving, they solidify and they escalate. The core positions become, well, they become rigid.
Exactly.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the advanced strategies used by people whose job it is to break that cycle. Expert mediators. We've pulled materials straight from advanced dispute resolution manuals. This is the playbook for communication under pressure.
So our mission for this deep dive is to get a fast but thorough understanding of how these experts structure communication. It's not about giving advice. It's about creating a roadmap, really, for a productive exchange.
Right. And the sources are clear that effective intervention is designed to encourage full expression, to bring those underlying issues to the surface, and to facilitate a true, nuanced exchange of information.
And that roadmap, as I understand it, it relies on two core synchronized components.
Yes, strategic question asking and rigorous active listening. These skills, when you use them together, they transform what is a zero-sum fight into a collaborative, problem-solving session.
And to guide that synchronization, we're focusing on a really powerful framework developed by renowned training faculty member Moshe Cohen. It's called the listening triangle. I understand this is basically the engine for all subsequent conversational strategy.
It really is the blueprint. And it looks deceptively simple in its structure, yet it requires just incredible discipline and practice.
So what are the steps?
The 3 steps are: 1, ask a question; 2, listen completely to the response; and 3, reflect back what you hear. This cycle ensures understanding before you move on, which is, that's the key to preventing escalation right there.
What's fascinating to me here is the conceptual shift this model forces, not just on the mediator, but on the parties themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when people enter a conflict, they are typically fixated on the past. What happened, who was wrong, what they think they deserve. The triangle helps impose a necessary temporal shift.
It's essential. The source material really highlights this conceptual movement. Parties start stuck in the past, focused on their rigid, often historical positions.
Right, I want this because of what you did.
Exactly. But the strategic use of the triangle, asking, listening, reflecting, it allows the mediator to pivot the focus to the present by uncovering their immediate interests and their needs.
And once those present needs are clearly defined and shared, then you can finally move the conversation forward to the future, where the focus shifts to developing constructive, forward-looking options for an agreement.
It's a purposeful extraction from historical grievance to future-oriented resolution.
You can't overstate the importance of that shift, can you?
No, you really can't. You cannot build a new agreement while you're both still arguing over who drove off the bridge. You need to identify what both parties need now to feel safe, and then together, you build a new bridge.
So let's start with that foundation, the crucial first step, the power of asking.
Yeah.
The manual emphasizes that skillful questioning is what transforms the process from, a hostile negotiation into a true conversation.
Right. It forces reflection and it forces perspective taking.
If you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right information. Or, maybe worse, you get information that just reinforces the existing rigid position.
That's so true. The questions used by skilled mediators are never casual. They're purposeful and strategic. They're designed to elicit specific types of information that fit into one of 8 distinct categories.
8. Wow.
Think of this not as just a simple list, but as your immediate diagnostic toolkit when you walk into a difficult room.
Okay, 8 purposes. That sounds like a really comprehensive system for information gathering. So which categories address the basic foundational information?
Well, the first 2 are really all about context and motivation. First, questions are used to draw out background or basic issues. This is establishing the what. Can you walk us through the timeline of events, for example?
The facts.
The facts. Second, and this is absolutely central to the facilitative approach, they are used to identify interests. This is establishing the why. Digging beneath the surface, demand the position to uncover the motivations, the goals, or the concerns that truly matter.
So establish the facts, then the underlying motivation. Once we have the why, I'm guessing the conversation naturally shifts towards solutions, right?
Precisely. The third purpose is to brainstorm options, moving the parties into a creative, solution-oriented mode. You might ask, what other ideas do you have for achieving that goal, outside of litigation?
That makes sense. Context, motivation, then solutions. But conflict resolution it's rarely that straightforward. Where do we inject the necessary dose of reality?
That's where the next three purposes come in. Fourth, questions are used for reality testing. This is maybe the most uncomfortable, but also the most essential category.
How so?
It forces parties to confront the true risks of not agreeing.
I see. Okay.
Fifth, questions encourage perspective taking, pushing a party to step outside their own partisan narrative. Something like, how do you think the judge will react to that argument? And sixth, they help parties weigh alternatives, which directly involves understanding the costs of their bait TNA.
Their BTNE, that's their best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Exactly. You need a clear-eyed view of what walking away truly means for them.
Okay, so the first six cover context, interests, solutions, and risk management. What about the final two? These must deal with the mechanics of actually getting an agreement over the finish line.
They do. Seventh, questions are designed to address barriers to agreement. If the parties are stuck, a highly focused, open-ended question is required. Like, you've both said you agree on 80% of the issues. What is the single biggest obstacle preventing you from closing this 20% gap today? It forces them to articulate the blocker.
I like that.
And finally, eighth, they confirm commitment to the agreed-upon solution or even just to the process itself. What steps will you each take this week to ensure this new communication plan is implemented?
That structural application is key. And I see the source material breaks these down into two fundamental types of questions. The ones designed to gather limited, specific data, and the ones designed to open the floodgates for broad understanding.
Yes, we use closed questions, but sparingly. These elicit only one or two words, a yes, a no, or a very specific factual data point.
So they're useful for things like confirmation.
For confirmation, yes. Did you send the document on Tuesday? Or for narrowing focus, how much does that option cost? Or for confirming procedural agreement, would you like to continue with caucuses today?
They're surgical. But the real transformative power, especially in a deep dive conversation like this, it comes from the open-ended questions. These are the invitations to speak freely and reveal those underlying interests.
Absolutely. They begin with how, why, or what, and verbal prompts like, tell me more about that experience. They are the tools for drawing out interests, for generating options, and for allowing the full, nuanced expression required for a genuine breakthrough. They produce the bulk of the essential, emotionally rich, and ultimately actionable information.
Okay, let's turn to some examples of these open-ended questions designed for those specific strategic purposes. I think these are the nuggets our listeners can probably start implementing immediately.
Okay, so when you are focusing on identifying interests, you have to intentionally bypass the demanded position. So instead of asking, why do you demand $10,000, you ask something like, what else besides the money is important to you in this resolution? Or, could you share with me why that specific outcome bothered you so intensely? These questions guide the party away from just the dollar figure and toward the underlying value, be it fairness or respect or acknowledgement.
And for reality testing, which, as you noted, involves confronting those uncomfortable consequences, the questions have to be sharp.
Very sharp. Asking, walk me through your worst-case scenario if negotiations fall apart today and this proceeds to litigation.
Oof.
Or for a business dispute. If you walk out without an agreement, how will your board or your key investors perceive that outcome? That immediately forces the party to weigh the pain of compromise against the pain of failure.
Then there's the profound power of encouraging perspective taking. In a conflict, the other side is so often seen as just a caricature or an enemy.
Right. And the mediator's role is to gently complicate that view. A really powerful perspective-taking question might be, you've helped me understand what your concerns are. Based on your understanding of their situation, what do you believe is most critical to them?
That small verbal flip is huge. It compels them to briefly inhabit the other side's shoes.
It does.
I also really appreciate the nuance in the questions aimed at addressing barriers. If the conflict is stuck, you have to name the resistance without assigning blame.
Right. Instead of, why are you being so difficult?
Yeah, exactly. Instead, you ask, what needs to happen for you to feel comfortable resolving this? Or the more expansive forward-looking invitation. Imagine we found a solution. What would it be like to be able to close this chapter and move forward with your life?
It connects the present pain to the possibility of future relief.
So that ability to craft the perfect question is the art, but you're saying that delivery is the science. The source provides absolutely crucial guidelines for the art of asking, centered entirely on building and maintaining trust.
Yes.
So let's run through those guidelines for delivery. They sound like the rules for true conversational integrity.
Okay, first, be purposeful. Every question has to have a motive that serves the resolution process. Is it to explore interests, test reality, or generate options? If the motive is just to satisfy your own curiosity or to secretly push your own agenda, it will absolutely undermine trust.
And second,
Yeah.
be diplomatic. The question should always function as an invitation to speak candidly,
Yeah.
never as an interrogation or, a rhetorical trap.
And the third rule, which seems mandatory for neutrality, avoid judgment. Even if the content of the answer is morally ambiguous, the question has to be framed neutrally. Accusatory framing. How could you possibly think that was fair? It just shuts the party down instantly.
Right.
And here is the skill that is the most difficult to master for most human beings. You have to allow silence.
Ah, that's a big one.
It is. Questions that force people to confront harsh truths, like the reality of their worst-case scenario, or make profound decisions, they require time to process. The source material is explicit. Don't rush to fill the void. Let the silence sit.
That space, it demonstrates respect for the gravity of the decision they're facing.
That is a brilliant point. The silence acknowledges the weight of their words.
Yeah.
Yes. And finally, keep it clean. Keep questions short and ask just one at a time. Lengthy, multi-part questions just confuse the party and diffuse the focus, leading to incomplete or non-responsive answers.
Sometimes less is more.
Often, the single word, why, or a simple conversational prompt like, say more about that, provides more insight than a really complex sentence structure.
That intense focus on the delivery of the question brings us seamlessly to step 2 of the triangle, listening. Once you ask that perfect question, the manual stresses you must immediately forget about the question you will ask next.
Yes.
You have to concentrate entirely on the response to the last question.
This requires a massive commitment of mental energy. It's the opposite of what most of us do in conversation, which is, waiting for our turn to speak. Mediators are trained to listen not just for the story, but for the specific, categorized elements of negotiation that they need to move the discussion forward.
What exactly are they trained to listen for? It sounds like information filtering.
Right. That's a great way to put it. As parties respond, they're revealing their core interests, motivations, goals, underlying concerns, values. They're revealing their concerns about prior relationships, past communication failures, or trust issues. They're revealing their alternatives if no agreement is reached, their BATNA, which informs the value of the current deal. Or they might tentatively throw out a potential option or a kernel of an idea.
So the disciplined listener hears the entire narrative, but is pulling out these essential elements for later use.
That's it. You're not just passively absorbing the story, you're actively categorizing motivations and possible solutions in real time. And while this critical internal process is happening, you also have to perform externally. You have to show that you are listening.
Right.
Demonstrating full attention is non-negotiable for building rapport and confidence. Simple physical cues are essential. Making sustained, appropriate eye contact, leaning forward slightly to convey engagement, and maybe most importantly, taking notes.
Taking notes. Why is that so important?
Notes signal to the party, I am committed to documenting your reality and your words. If you aren't writing it down, they might assume you aren't retaining it.
I see. And this brings us to step 3, reflection, which completes the loop of understanding. The source material emphasizes that listening on its own is insufficient. You have to express that understanding back to the party.
This is the critical step that defines the listening triangle. The mediation pioneers Gary Friedman and Jack Himmelstein, in Challenging Conflict, explained that the purpose of this reflective loop is not to convince or contradict, but to truly understand and communicate that understanding.
And by establishing that clarity early on, the mediator begins the process of helping the parties break the cycle of misunderstanding.
That's a powerful idea, isn't it? Understanding is an active verb in this context.
Yes, it is. And when we express that understanding, the sources say we have 3 distinct techniques, and they vary dramatically in their strategic utility.
That's right. The 3 techniques are parroting, paraphrasing, and reframing.
Okay, start with parroting. Why would you ever simply repeat verbatim what someone just said? It sounds like, bad conversational manners.
It does, but its utility is highly specialized. Parroting means repeating the exact words the party used. It serves 2 main purposes. First, it confirms accuracy when you're dealing with specific facts or numbers.
Okay.
Second, it holds up a mirror for self-reflection. If a party keeps repeating a highly charged phrase, repeating it back to them, you have said several times that he's trying to hold you back. Help me understand what you mean by that phrase. It signals that you had the words, but you haven't yet grasped the meaning. It signals deeper explanation is needed.
I see. So if a party is highly emotional and shouts, "I am really infuriated with him," the mediator might just calmly echo that back.
Exactly. Okay, I hear the intensity of that. You were really infuriated with him. It validates without escalating.
And paraphrasing is the most common technique people associate with good listening.
It is. Paraphrasing is restating the core message in your own neutral words while remaining absolutely true to the original intent and feeling. It conveys empathy and understanding in a way that is often less aggressive than the original language.
So if an employee vents about a manager constantly looking over their shoulder, saying it makes project completion impossible,
The mediator might paraphrase, "It sounds like you're frustrated because you feel a lack of trust, and that micromanagement is directly impeding your ability to deliver your projects on time."
that's highly effective for conveying empathy. But the source notes a limitation that keeps the mediator from making real progress.
It does. The limitation is that paraphrasing just acts as a snapshot. It captures the party's current emotional state or their definition of the problem as they currently see it. It just summarizes the existing rigid position.
So to achieve a true perspective change and shift the conflict, we need the third and most critical skill.
Reframing.
Reframing is the transformative skill. This is what moves us from a description of past pain into a present discussion of future solutions.
Exactly. The goal here is helping the parties gain a new perspective and redefine the problem in a way that is mutually solvable.
I want to bring in Bernard Mayer's definition here, an expert in conflict resolution, who describes reframing as changing the way a thought is presented so that it maintains its fundamental meaning but is more likely to support resolution efforts.
Mayer just captures the essence perfectly. The mediator must honor the richness and emotional intensity of the conflict, the anger, the betrayal, the fear, but assist parties in seeing the situation in a more open-minded and hopeful way.
So we're taking a rigid position, what the party demands, and recasting it as an underlying legitimate human need or a problem that can be mutually solved.
That's it.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics. How do we make that critical shift? This feels like the core application of that temporal shift we talked about earlier.
It is. There are 5 absolutely crucial shifts that guide a successful reframe.
Okay, let's walk through them.
First, the mechanical shift. We have to restate the position or demand as an interest, as a need to be addressed or a problem to be resolved.
So this is the shift from what they demand to why they demand it.
Exactly. The position is, "I want him fired." The interest is, "You need assurance that the safety protocols will be strictly followed in the future." You trade a rigid demand for an underlying, flexible need.
And the second shift is temporal. We are pulling the party out of history.
That's right. We must restate it to describe a present need rather than a recitation of past frustrations. We start the reframe with action-oriented phrases like, "So what you need today is," or "What is most important to you moving forward is." You are actively pulling their focus from the past incident into the actionable present where change is possible.
Third, and this seems vital for de-escalation, we must focus on the need, not personalities.
Oh, absolutely. The conflict is significantly easier to solve if the problem is defined as dependable service and consistent quality, not him being incompetent and lazy. We separate the person from the core operational problem.
The fourth shift is subtle but psychologically powerful. We have to restate the need in affirmative terms, not as negation or a denial.
Yes. Instead of reflecting, "You don't feel listened to or respected by the management team," you frame it positively. You want to be heard, and you want your long tenure to be recognized and valued as an employee. This subtle change turns the goal from stopping a negative thing to achieving a positive thing.
And finally, the language shift.
Yeah.
You have to convey the full meaning, including the emotional impact, but use strictly neutral language to avoid alienating the other party.
That's right. You can acknowledge the impact. Trust is absolutely the central issue here, but you have to eliminate the inflammatory words used by the party, words like deceitful, sleazy, or incompetent, to uphold your impartiality and maintain a safe space for the other party.
This sounds incredibly difficult to do on the fly. How do you practice moving from the party's highly personal, charged language to this neutral, affirmative, interest-based language.
It requires a lot of practice and internal processing speed. Let's look at the source's example of the angry employee who is furious about micromanagement, lack of trust, and delayed projects. So when the party vents, the mediator is rapidly filtering for the interests: the desire to work independently, the need to feel trusted, and the goal to complete projects on time.
And the mediator has to synthesize all three into one coherent statement that the employee then validates.
Right. And the reframe has to hit all those notes. I hear that work has been very frustrating for you lately. Meeting your project deadlines is really important to you, but to achieve that, you need trust and the space to work independently with minimal, agreed-upon supervision.
Notice how we took the negative feeling, the frustration, the micromanagement, and turned it into an affirmative, solvable requirement. Trust, space, agreed-upon supervision.
That is effective. Let's try the complex neighborhood dispute scenario. These are often so dense with personal grievances, trash buildup, constant traffic, loud noises, the owner not keeping promises. The party feels their home life is being violated.
The mediator has to capture the richness of that violation while focusing on the core interests: neighborliness, respect for shared space, and assurance that commitments are kept. The mediator's job isn't to judge the specific grievances, but to find the universal human need that's underneath them.
Right, so the reframe must focus on the highest common denominator, which is quality of life and respect.
Exactly. The mediator reflects. It sounds like the quality of life in your neighborhood has been significantly disrupted, and that matters a lot to you. You are seeking assurance that those who live and work here treat each other with respect, and you need a commitment that issues like trash removal and parking congestion will be reliably addressed so that your neighborhood can be a good place to live again.
And just like that, we are now discussing an agreement on sanitation schedules and parking policies, not yelling at the bakery owner about being a bad neighbor.
This implies there is a translation key for these highly emotional complaints. And the source material actually provides a quick guide, a cheat sheet, really, for synthesizing the most common complaints into core interests.
It saves so much time and mental energy when the conversation is intense. When you hear a party repeatedly say their treatment was unfair or not right, the core interest is almost always fairness. The immediate reframe is, you want to be treated fairly in this process.
And if they say someone was unreasonable, the interest is reasonableness, which translates into a need for logic or data or predictable outcomes.
Right. And if the complaint focuses on interaction, they never listen or they ignore me, the interest is to be heard or better communication. The reframe. You are looking for an opportunity to be heard directly and for a commitment to a clearer line of communication going forward.
And finally, the complaint about loyalty being ignored, "I've worked here for 20 years," or "I've been a loyal customer for a decade," that always points to respect.
Yes. The reframe acknowledges the history but turns it into a present need. Respect for your long years of service is important to you, and you want that history taken into account when figuring out this solution. This skill, the ability to reframe instantaneously, it's paramount because it immediately takes the oxygen out of the fight and allows the parties to focus on solving the problem, not defeating the person.
Okay, now we can put the entire structure together. The listening triangle in action is not a linear process, it's a cycle. The skill is in continually cycling the steps to drill down into deeper, truer interests.
The full process flow is ask, listen, reflect. Then ask a relevant, open-ended question that draws out additional information about the reflection. That follow-up question leverages the understanding you just expressed and prevents the conversation from stalling at a surface level.
Let's walk through the full cycle using that famous, detailed example from the source material, the barking dog scenario. The initial position is rigid and absolute.
Absolutely. The party's initial position is a pure demand. I want him to get rid of that dog. It's making my life a living hell, and I'm going to sue.
Okay, so the mediator recognizes this as a position driven by frustration and has to gently break it down. So using the triangle, the mediator listens for the feeling and reflects on the general outcome the party is seeking. Something like, "Sounds like you'd like things to be more stress-free and peaceful at home."
And the party validates that reflection. Now, the mediator transitions back to step one with a really powerful, open-ended question that forces the temporal shift. You say you want your neighbor to get rid of his dog. Let's assume he does. Specifically, how will things be different for you then?
That follow-up question is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant because it compels the party to articulate the true underlying needs that the dog is obstructing.
And the party responds with their true interests revealed. It's the incessant barking all night long. It's preventing me and my children from getting a good night's sleep. And I'm sick of worrying about my kids getting attacked by the dog in their own yard. I'm terrified for their safety.
So now the mediator has actionable, solvable interests: peace and quiet sleep and safety security.
Right.
The mediator can now deliver the final reframe that captures the richness of the complaint while making it something the neighbor can actually work with. So the key issues for you are ensuring peace and quiet, particularly at night, and having a definitive assurance that your children are safe in their own yard.
And that reframe peace, quiet, and safety is completely different from the initial position of get rid of the dog. Now the negotiation can focus on options like soundproofing or limiting the dog's outdoor time or secured fencing, rather than on the impossibility of parting with a pet.
And the triangle isn't just for identifying interests, it's also the engine for generating options and transitioning toward those future-oriented agreements. Let's look at the example of the shared office.
Okay, so a party complains about a colleague named Olive. They value the relationship, but they need her to respect their physical and mental space, and they haven't figured out how to communicate without conflict. The mediator has already used the cycle to identify the interests. Value relationship, need respect for space, want better communication.
So the mediator reflects these confirmed interests back, then transitions seamlessly into options using a targeted question designed to brainstorm.
Exactly, something like, given that your goals are to maintain a working relationship and establish better mutual respect for space, what tangible ideas do you have about sharing the office space and improving daily communication?
And because the interests are clear and agreed upon, the party can respond immediately with tangible ideas.
Maybe we need some kind of temporary marker, like a masking tape line down the middle of the desk. Or perhaps we need to rearrange the furniture to establish physically separate working areas. Maybe we need a visual screen.
The mediator reflects those options back, the temporary solution, the potential furniture solutions, and then continues the brainstorming cycle by asking, what other ideas do you have?
And this cycle just repeats, building agreement brick by brick until consensus is reached.
We've established the structure of effective communication, but we cannot discuss conflict resolution without discussing the human element, emotion. The source material highlights that emotion isn't just a disruptive force, it is critical.
It fuels deliberation, cost-benefit analyses, and our ability to think about the future.
That's where behavioral economics and neuroscience really inform the process. Positive emotions, hope, trust, mutual respect, they foster collaboration and greater openness to others' ideas. But negative emotions, anger, grief, shame, they have to be managed effectively because they inhibit the higher-level processing required for creative problem-solving.
That's right. And Roger Fisher and Daniel Shapiro explored the deep roots of these feelings in Beyond Reason, identifying 5 core concerns that are constantly being activated in negotiation and conflict.
And if these concerns are met, they foster positive emotional responses. If denied, they trigger powerful negative reactions.
And these 5 concerns are the universal human needs driving behavior in conflict. The first is appreciation. The fundamental need to be understood, to be valued, and to feel that one's contributions have merit. If you feel unappreciated, you pull back.
Right.
The second is affiliation. The need to feel like a colleague, a team member, or a valued family member, a sense of connection rather than isolation.
Third is autonomy. The absolute need to be free to make your own decisions and choices. If people feel forced or manipulated or trapped, they will deploy resistance.
They will. And fourth is status. Having respect and recognition for one's standing, not necessarily superiority, but acknowledgement of one's identity or contribution.
And the fifth is role. The need to feel fulfilled by one's function, both inside and outside the conflict arena.
Right. If a lawyer feels their client is undermining their role or a manager feels their authority is being circumvented, conflict escalates. A mediator has to understand that denial of any of these 5 concerns is a direct pathway to an emotional explosion.
And when intense emotion erupts, fury, deep grief, frustration, the mediator's response is everything. The material's very explicit. You must acknowledge the emotion fully. Don't dismiss it by minimizing the feeling, and don't try to control the language unless it violates the ground rules.
The source material contrasts effective versus ineffective responses pretty starkly. Look at the example of a party who is infuriated at a low offer they deem humiliating.
Okay.
The wrong responses are minimizing the emotion, you sound a little upset, or trying to control the expression, please calm down and use neutral language.
So what's the correct response?
Full validation linked to a core need, often the need for appreciation or status. You're incredibly angry at the offer they made. As you said, it's humiliating. You need a serious offer that recognizes and addresses the magnitude of all that you've been through and respects your contribution.
So you acknowledge the raw emotion, but you immediately reframe it into an affirmative, actionable need that speaks to their core concerns.
Exactly. Or consider the deep complexity of handling the grieving party, a situation that sometimes occurs in medical or catastrophic disputes. A parent who has lost a child might be weeping uncontrollably. The mediator doesn't just offer a break and wait for the emotion to pass.
No, the mediator provides profound validation.
They might respond, "I am so very sorry for your loss, Louisa. How devastating for you and your husband to lose your son Hector. I am truly sorry." That addresses the primary grief.
And then?
Then the mediator identifies the secondary emotional interest, which might be solvable. Louisa, what I hear is that this loss has been compounded by the secondary issue that you had hoped for some acknowledgement of your grief and your son's experience from those involved in his medical care.
So that technique validates the core human loss and then identifies a potentially solvable interest, the need for acknowledgement and appreciation, which the other side might actually be able to provide.
And that can lead to a path of emotional resolution, even if the primary loss can never be undone.
It's a critical reminder that emotions are healthy. They signal the importance of the interests at stake. Venting, if you manage it appropriately, can clear the air and allow for a transition to problem solving.
It can. However, the mediator must watch the reaction of the other party.
Absolutely.
If one party is verbally attacking the other, the mediator has to step in quickly to protect the safety of the process. This is where you put control back in the party's hands. You might say, "I hear that this needs to be said, but other party, is this way of speaking working for you? Is there a different way you want to set the ground rules for how we talk to each other?"
And that allows the parties to reinforce boundaries and ensures the process remains voluntary and respectful. Okay, now we shift gears to the practical difficulties of the job. Dealing with difficult behaviors and barriers. Even with the best listening structure, people get stuck, angry, or defensive.
Mediators have to maintain a few core guidelines here. First, be compassionate. Conflict brings out the worst in people because it touches their deepest interests. Imagine yourself under the same pressure.
That's good advice.
Second, remember the principles of mediation. It is always voluntary, and parties retain complete autonomy. It is their responsibility to choose a solution. And, if you are lucky enough to be co-mediating, rely on your co-mediator. Use a break or a private session to strategize how to move forward. You are not facing the difficulty alone.
Okay, let's break down the strategies for the 4 specific difficult types detailed in the manual, starting with the most common, the angry person.
Right. For the angry person, your primary strategy is to allow venting. Stay silent, maintain eye contact, let them express the frustration. Use paraphrasing to validate the emotion. You are absolutely furious about X.
And if the anger is unproductive or escalating?
Offer a break to cool down. And crucially, you put control back in their hands. Remind them that all decisions, including the decision to stay in the room and how they speak, are theirs. That often counters the feeling of powerlessness that's fueling their anger.
And if the verbal attack is directed at the other party?
You protect the other party by separating them immediately and moving into private sessions or caucuses until the anger is channeled.
Okay. Next, the challenger, the party who questions the mediator's competence or credentials. This is a direct attack on the process itself.
You have to internalize the fact that this is almost never personal. It's usually frustration with the issues and the lack of power they feel in the conflict. The key strategy is to confront the behavior directly and honestly.
How do you do that?
You remind them that mediation is voluntary and they are free to leave and pursue their BATNA. You might say, "I've noticed you've brought up my experience and credentials several times this morning, and I take your concerns seriously. If you do not feel I can serve as an impartial guide, we must end this session now. I want to respect your time. What do you want to do?"
You have to be prepared to end it.
You must be willing to end the session and withdraw if your impartiality is genuinely threatened, as maintaining neutrality is paramount.
Then there is the positional or stuck person, the one who refuses to budge from a single rigid demand, like the $150,000 figure they came in with.
With this person, you have to be explicit and persistent. First, describe what you see and seek understanding. You might reflect. "We have spent the last hour going through the details of the past event, but I haven't heard any path forward. What action steps are you prepared to take today to resolve this?"
You also have to be explicit about the purpose of the process.
Yes. Mediation can't rewrite history, but it can help you figure out how to work together today. Is that something you're open to doing?
And this is where the reality hammer comes out. The aggressive use of inquire, intubate, TNA. This is a necessary reality check.
This is one of the most powerful tools in the mediator's toolkit, and it's often deployed in the privacy of a caucus. You have to push them to confront the full financial, emotional, and time costs of failure. If you walk out without an agreement today, what is the best possible outcome for you at trial? And what is the worst? What is the guaranteed cost of legal fees and time lost, regardless of the outcome?
You force them to calculate the cost of their own rigidity. That's the difference between hope for resolution and certainty of failure.
Exactly. You can also challenge them to explain why they are even there if they believe their current path is a slam dunk win. If you are 100% certain of winning, why spend time here today? Help me understand the value of this process to you right now. It makes them articulate a purpose for compromise.
And the fourth difficult person is the silent and withdrawn person, who may be overwhelmed by anger or grief or just the complexity of the issues.
When you encounter prolonged silence, you meet in private to affirm confidentiality and create a safer space. Show concern and ask what they need. I notice that you've said very little this morning. I'm concerned. Is there anything you need right now or anything we can do to make this process easier for you?
And this is another one of those moments where the mediator needs immense restraint.
Precisely. Critically, remain silent yourself. Do not bombard them with questions. Silence gives them the necessary space to formulate an answer or simply adjust to the intense environment. And lastly, you empower them by reminding them the session is voluntary and they can take a break or end it at any time.
Beyond just handling individual behavior, the manual provides crucial strategies for overcoming roadblocks when the entire process is stuck due to issues like trust or complex data. These are advanced tactics to inject momentum.
To build confidence, mediators should start by achieving small wins. Tackle less contentious issues first. This builds momentum and shows the parties that agreement is actually possible. If exhaustion or frustration sets in, take a break for reflection, for gathering data, or for consulting external advisors.
We've discussed BATNA, but the review of progress made so far also seems vital for perspective.
It is. When parties are bogged down in the last 10% of the dispute, summarizing the 90% they have already agreed upon gives them necessary perspective and renewed energy.
And we can also use hypotheticals, asking what-if scenarios to shift perspective without requiring commitment.
What if we assumed for a moment that the valuation was X? How would you structure the payment schedule?
I find the tactic of mediating within the mediation fascinating. This acknowledges that the conflict isn't always just between the two main parties.
It happens frequently. It occurs when there are deep differences of opinion between a client and their own lawyer. Maybe the client has unrealistic emotional expectations the lawyer knows are impossible. Or in a multi-party dispute, rivalries or communication breakdowns within a single group might impede consensus. The mediator needs to meet with these internal factions separately to resolve those divisions first.
And the final tactic for getting unstuck is the ultimate goal shift, which David Hoffman framed perfectly. Asking parties to envision resolution trading hope for certainty.
That is the ultimate trade-off. They may hope they will prevail at trial, but that hope comes with extreme risk, time, and expense. In mediation, they can trade that hope for the guaranteed agreement and immediate closure, allowing them to rebuild their lives or their businesses now. This framing often breaks a final deadlock. To ensure all this intricate communication is tracked, remembered, and made real, mediators frequently turn to visual aids, the final tool in the arsenal.
And this can be as simple as an easel, or as high-tech as financial modeling software. Visuals serve several essential functions that support the communication triangle.
They are crucial for keeping track of vast amounts of new information and for developing a clear, neutral agenda by listing the reframed interests the parties have articulated.
Right, they're a powerful aid for brainstorming and tracking progress.
And in complex civil mediation, tools like decision trees are often mapped out visually for assessing costs and risks, showing the probabilities and financial implications of various paths.
And the high-tech versions, like digital spreadsheets, are used to run through financial scenarios, assessing gains, risks, tax implications, which directly informs that reality testing we discussed.
Yes. Seeing the numbers projected side by side moves the discussion out of the realm of emotion and into verifiable data.
Whether it's high-tech or low-tech, the guidelines for effective use are strict. The visuals must support the process, not distract from it.
First, be familiar with the technology and test it in advance. A technical breakdown can derail a fragile conversation.
And crucially, use visuals to focus exclusively on interests and neutral facts, not positions or personal accusations. You are writing down the neutral reframes, need for dependable service, not the inflammatory language that was used earlier.
Right, and keep it clean. Write legibly and avoid wordiness. Do not allow the use of visual aids, especially digital screens, to interfere with eye contact or create a physical barrier between you and the parties. Direct, human communication remains paramount.
And finally, we have to consider the practical and ethical concerns.
Always, always have a contingency plan, an easel ready if the digital tech fails. And remember the strict ethical duty to ensure all mediation work product, including digital information recorded on the aids, is secured or destroyed due to confidentiality requirements. The data created in the session must remain confidential to the session.
This has been a profoundly insightful journey through the architecture of effective communication under duress. We started with the idea that communication is the first casualty of conflict, and we have ended with a clear architectural solution, the listening triangle.
We've thoroughly examined the synergy of strategic questioning and rigorous listening, the discipline of the three-step structure, and the transformative power of reframing, which takes a rigid, past-oriented demand and recasts it as a mutual present-day interest.
And mastering these skills, as the trainers emphasize, requires constant, intense practice, time, energy, and full attention.
It does. The goal is always to establish profound understanding early to help break the cycle of misunderstanding.
And that cycle breaking isn't just for formal mediation rooms. This applies everywhere.
You now have the mediator's toolkit for navigating complex interactions. Think about this as you move into your next high-stakes or emotionally charged conversation, whether it's with a colleague, a difficult vendor, or a family member. How often do you pause after someone speaks, consciously filter their words for their core affirmative interest, and then reflect that understanding back to them, rather than immediately formulating your own rebuttal?
That moment of intentional reflection is where resolution and better connection begins.